So welcome back to Beyond the Ceremony podcast. My name is Laura Crockett. I am your host, and I am very, very excited for today's episode because it is a life-changing development within the wedding industry. We are going to be talking today about wedding law reform, marriage law reform, whichever way you've heard it, being coined. It is a huge, huge moment in the wedding industry, potentially the biggest change in wedding law in 200 years. So it's very, very exciting. But I've got two experts with me today. We're going to be talking all about the consultation for wedding law reform. So first of all, I have got Professor of Law at Cardiff University, Russell Sandberg. Hello, Russell.
Hello.
Lovely to
Pleasure
have
to be
you.
here.
Thank you for joining me today. And we've also got the campaign lead at the Give Couples Choice movement, who have been, absolutely flying the flag for these changes and just doing some fantastic work over the last few years. So Sophie Easton, it's really lovely to have you as well, Sophie. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So first of all, Sophie, if I can come to you first and just kind of give us a bit of an overview of what the Give Couples Choice movement is and what it is that you've kind of been working on over these last few years.
Well, so the Give Couples Choice movement was actually set up, I think it was actually during COVID
Wow.
in 2020. So I wasn't involved from the very beginning. I was working with the Celebrant Association back then. But really, it was a group of Celebrant volunteers who wanted to really build momentum and push forward this law reform, make sure that celebrants got involved, that couples got involved, and went and spoke to their MPs about why this really mattered. So it really was a momentum building exercise because the law reform process has been going on for quite a number of years. It first started in 2019, which is when the Law Commission started doing their review. But the government actually acknowledged that wedding law needed reforming. I think it was back in 2015.
Yeah.
So it's been going on for quite a long time. The wheels were already in motion, but it was really about kind of pushing forward and building that momentum.
And it's just gone from strength to strength recently. And obviously, these wins that we've had recently with the consultation have just been so exciting. I bet you must be over the moon with everything's come on over the years.
I cannot describe how over the moon we were.
I bet.
Weeks ago when the consultation was launched.
Yeah.
I don't want to kind of overplay it because it's not over yet. This is not legislation yet,
Yeah.
which we'll go into later. People do need to respond to the consultation. But the very fact that the government have said that their initial view is that they support independent celebrants it was just an amazing moment to read that for the first time.
Absolutely, I can imagine. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall watching you when you read the consultation for the first time. I bet it was a wonderful moment. And Russell, I'm going to come to you. So before we get into, the nitty gritty and the real details, can you just give us kind of in simple terms what this consultation actually is and why it does matter?
Well, it's a consultation to change the law on how couples get married, which actually is foundational to the whole wedding industry and indeed to people's lives up and down the country, because it's proposing a move from our current system, which regulates buildings, to a system that instead regulates people. And, the headlines around the consultation were all about this will mean that people can get married pretty much wherever they want. Marriage on a beach, marriage in a castle, marriage in your home. And the key thing is it'll also allow them to be married by whoever they want. And that's basically what the consultation is focused on.
Yeah.
In several respects, reading the consultation, it felt like Christmas.
Yes.
The government has accepted a lot of what the Law Commission were arguing for back in the day, but has gone further in certain respects. And it's a very well-written document. I think it's a very, very accessible document in as far as these things can be accessible. And, the key thing now is to meet that enthusiasm with enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
And respond to the consultation by the middle or towards the end of September.
Yeah, September the 24th, isn't it? It's open to. And I think there's been so much talk about how fantastic it is to have this consultation and how life-changing it's going to be for the industry, but actually what sometimes people might not be aware of, perhaps couples or, people within the wedding industry who maybe aren't celebrants themselves, is that this consultation is open to everyone. It is a public consultation.
Yeah.
And we need everyone to, have their say and and really make sure that they are getting those points across.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were expecting a need to fight in relation to the consultation.
Yeah.
Because we weren't expecting necessarily that sentence of those couple of paragraphs, which said the government accepted the argument that independent celebrants should be included. The passion that would have been in with that fight still needs to be there.
Yes.
Because the thing that can kill this is a lukewarm reception.
Yeah.
It needs to be underlined that this is absolutely something that the government should prioritise.
Absolutely.
And, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
These changes, if they are enacted, and just to underscore, this is just a consultation. A consultation can come and go, and nothing can happen. If it moves forward, we'd then be looking at legislation at some point, and even at that point, things can change. So just because the cards have landed in a particular way in terms of the consultation, that doesn't mean that's the only way the cards are ever going to land.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to celebrate, but it's important to continue to push.
Yeah.
And it's important to realise that this is the first significant step on the journey, but it's still just a step.
Yeah, absolutely. We have such a big part to play, don't we? So let's break it down very simply. The consultation you can access online. I don't know if there's another way of accessing it. Is there the way that people can maybe respond by post? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's online. You can access it via a link, which, Celebrants are sharing all across social media. Give Couples Choice Movement have shared it. Russ, I know you've shared it. Everyone, basically, who has an interest in this have been sharing the link. So you click on the link, it takes you through to an online consultation, which has 7 chapters. So I will very quickly read off what those 7 chapters are. So the first one is called About You. The second one is Chapter 2, Preliminaries. Chapter 3 is the legal formation of marriage. Chapter 4 is the dignity framework. Chapter 5 is specific locations for weddings. Chapter 6 is the role of officiants. And Chapter 7 is the regulation of officiants. Now, that sounds like quite a lot. And if you're sat there just listening to this thinking, wow, this sounds huge, actually, each section has only got a maximum of 10 questions in it. And really, on average, they're more around 5 or 6 questions. So, Sophie, what kind of parts of the consultation should, in particular, be paying attention to? So what parts of those 7 chapters are really important for us to be making sure that we're getting involved with and answering?
Well, obviously, Chapter 6, the role of officiants,
Yes.
is a really important one, because we would be independent celebrants, if this goes ahead, would be known as independent officiants. So that's the chapter that really applies to us. But the dignity framework in Chapter 4 is a really important one to look at. This dignity framework is something which the whole consultation really is built around. The government have been clear all along that they want to reform and modernise wedding law, but they do not want to detract from the dignity, the seriousness of what a marriage is. So I think it's really important that celebrants look at that and have their say, because, of course, any independent celebrant will tell you that their ceremonies are absolutely dignified, and they are. We know they are. But we need to put evidence forward to the government to show that they are dignified and meaningful and serious, in the sense that, that the couple are making a serious commitment to one another. But you can be, as the government acknowledge in the consultation, you can be serious about that commitment and at the same time have meaningful, light-hearted elements to the ceremony to make it really personal to you. Then obviously Chapter 7, sorry, I'm jumping
That's
about
okay,
a bit.
it's fine, it's all good.
4, dignity framework. Chapter 6, role of officiant, and Chapter 7, regulation of officiants. So that's a really important one. If an independent celebrant, if this goes ahead, wanted to apply to conduct legal marriages, and of course you don't have to, but if we wanted to apply to conduct legal marriages, then there would have to be a framework of regulation. So that is a really important one. What do we think the regulation around us should look like? But I would also caveat that by saying, I think it's really important to read the whole thing.
Yes.
Because you can't really just take, 1 or 2 chapters on their own without having considered the overall framework of how this is going to work. So it is, although it is a fairly long document, it's like you said, it's very easy to digest.
Yes.
Especially if you're reading it online and you can click on the menu on the left
Yeah.
to go through all of the sections. You could even use a screen reader and listen to it being read aloud
That's
as
a good
you're,
idea.
hanging out the laundry or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
If you're buying. So I think it is important to read the whole thing, but those are the 3 chapters I think are very important.
Absolutely,
for celebrants.
absolutely. So in terms of, obviously, the consultation is asking us to, respond with our own answers. What about the bits that we need to be reading before we're actually ready to respond? Like, are there certain documents that we have to, like you say, have listened to? Where can we find those? Are they available with the consultation, or do we need to go elsewhere for those?
So they're available with the consultation. So really that is the most important thing at this stage, I think, is to read the consultation, which you can find on the government website. And then there's a link you can click that takes you to this question specifically, but the questions are also embedded into the consultation document.
Yes.
So, for example, you go to chapter 2, you read all the content, and then chapter 2 finishes with questions that are relevant to that information, and then you move on to the next chapter. So it lays it all out really clearly. If you want to sort of brush up on what's happened before, then you can read the Law Commission recommendations, which you can find on the Law Commission. You just Google Law Commission weddings, it will come up, their whole page with links to their final recommendations, which were published in 2022. That is a very long document,
Yes.
but again, there's a summary and, you can read the bits that are most relevant. So you could read that if you wanted to, you don't have to. Because there are some things that the Law Commission recommended that the government have said in this consultation, actually, we don't really agree with that.
Okay.
We think we're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
Most of the things it looks like they are agreeing with. But if you wanted to see what have the Law Commission recommended compared to what the government are recommending, then look at both documents.
Absolutely.
You can also find a policy paper which the GCCM put together, which is on the Give Couples Choice Movement website. And that's really speaking on behalf of independent celebrants. The consultation is way bigger than just independent celebrants. It's covering so many different areas of weddings and marriage. But if you're obviously specifically interested in how independent celebrants or officiants are going to fit into this, you might want to read that GCCM policy paper, which was a collaboration between lots of different celebrant organisations.
Brilliant. That's fantastic, Sophie. Thank you. And then, Russell, I'm going to come to you for this one. What would you say makes a consultation response influential? So what should we make sure that we're including in our answers and in our arguments to make sure that they really, are going to help make a difference?
So I think that's the first thing, is that, you don't have to answer all the questions. I think particularly the way these questions are written, they plunge straight into the detail.
Yes, they do.
Because, we've previously had consultations and debates about the wider issues. That's not this, right? This is not a sort of an invitation to reopen the question of whether we need to have wedding reform.
Yes.
And all those bigger issues. This is about now the details and about this specific proposal which is put here. So there's numerous ways in which you can respond. We've referred to this sort of online questionnaire that you can fill out. There's also an email address. There's also a postal address. But what I would urge is that you need to respond to the questions actually asked.
Yes.
Which might seem to be a daft point to make, but trust me with these things, that's absolutely key. So, it might well be that you're looking at it and thinking, well, actually, I've got nothing to say about the preliminaries. That's fine. Just focus on those questions that you want to respond to.
Yes.
And the key thing is to give your experience, to give your reasons, to back what the document says when you want to back what the document says. Right. So, I think a lot of people look at a consultation like they look at any bit of feedback and go, right, I'm just going to say the bits I disagree with.
Yes.
And that's obviously important, but that's not the whole thing here. So if you're looking at questions, particularly that question on whether independent celebrants should be included, and you're minded to tick yes, and if you're not minded to tick yes, I don't quite know why you're listening to this podcast.
Yes.
Minded to tick yes, then also give your reasons.
Yes,
You're
absolutely.
looking at those pages from the government going, yes, these reasons speak to me, and I agree with them, and I've got evidence to back them, then do that.
Absolutely.
Don't feel that you have to reinvent the wheel. And, if there's particular bits of this which you think, yes, that sounds reasonably sensible, but the details sound off, then say that.
Yes, absolutely.
In relation to this dignity framework, which seems very legalistic, but it's going to be important that actually works.
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
think one of the things is worth going into this consultation paper thinking about in terms of how you respond if you're a celebrant,
Yeah.
is that you will have, if this comes to pass, you will have a choice as to whether or not you want to conduct legally binding ceremonies.
Yes.
Then certain legal obligations will be on you. So one thing you can do while reading this document, it's only about 80 pages, probably less than that by the time you take out the questions, significantly less than that if you take out the questions, is thinking, right, okay, what are these proposals saying in terms of what obligations would be placed on me? And how do I understand those obligations? Do I understand those obligations? Do those obligations speak to me? And I think particularly in relation to the dignity framework, that would be incredibly helpful, because what the government's looking for here as well is tweaks.
Yes.
They're looking for things which sort of raise concern, or things which people go, well, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah.
There's a few of them, I would imagine, that a lot of celebrants could pick up on.
Yes.
So one of the things which comes across in that dignity framework is, and just to be very clear here, actually, before I could go into the detail. So what the basics of this proposal are, or this set of proposals are, is that a lot of the obligations would be moved to the preliminaries, and that wouldn't be the responsibility of the celebrant. It would still be done by the state.
Yes.
So a lot of the sort of the check-ins, the lot of concerns about sort of sham marriages, that kind of thing, would be taken care of. Whereas the officiants would be responsible for what happens during the ceremony and making sure that that complies with the dignity framework.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's other obligations which would be on them.
Yes.
And there's elements of check-in as part of that. And what the document makes very clear is that most of the time, the dignity framework wouldn't even be a consideration. It would only be a consideration if you're conducting a wedding in a new environment.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
And then there's these criteria to take into account, which seem fairly general. That's easy for me to say from my ivory tower. One of the things which sort of comes up here is this idea that a dignified ceremony would be something that's separate from other things that go on, if that makes sense. So they give the example in the consultation of, it could happen in a sports arena, but not in the middle of a match.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Now, that on its surface makes complete sense. But I was thinking earlier, well, hang on a second. In the religious context, you've got a wedding ceremony which takes place in the context of an act of worship, typically. So it might be worth thinking of, are there things which that rule or that understanding of that rule might get in the way of? And there's also a particular question under the dignity stuff, which is about food and drink.
Yes, I saw that one, yeah.
And that, I think, is something to kind of to look at from your angle in terms of practice, in terms of whether the line is being drawn in the right place there.
And I think it depends as well on different celebrants, because, for example, I might have celebrant colleagues who do loads of hand fastings and hand tyings, and that's a big thing for them. I might have loads, like with the food and drink, who, might do the quiche ceremonies or the cocktail blendings or the shots and things like that. I would say my ceremonies don't tend to have a lot of that in there. A lot of mine are more what you would say a traditional timeline, but done in a personal way, I guess. And so I think that's where it's so important that this consultation has responses from everyone. Everyone needs to get involved because everyone will have, slightly different opinions, won't they, on that? And it's important for them to hear.
And it might just be sort of 4 or 5 questions you answer in detail.
Yes.
Right? That's the point.
Yes.
You might, but then there's these particular questions where, we mentioned a few of them, where I think a detailed response will be incredibly useful.
100%. And everyone will be able to provide detailed responses to different questions, won't they, depending on their experience. And Sophie, what kind of evidence, we've mentioned evidence a few times, but what sort of evidence should we be gathering? What sort of evidence do you think the government's looking for us to, really provide in those longer answer boxes? What kind of evidence should we be supplying them with?
I think examples of the ceremonies that we've conducted or that we're planning are so important, because what you want to do when you're reading this consultation is put yourself in that situation. Okay, imagine I can already conduct legal ceremonies under this framework that the government's proposing. How would this work for this couple and this couple and this couple?
Yes.
How would this work for someone who wants to get married in a farm and there's loads of animals around?
Yeah.
How is it going to work for this couple who want to have a cocktail blending ceremony? The food and drink thing is quite interesting because they're proposing that food and drink would still be allowed in our ceremonies if it's part of a ritual, part of the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
So we could still do things like, I know a lot of celebrants do things like sharing of a cup or a cocktail blending, something like that. But you make it really symbolic and part of the dignity, I suppose, and the seriousness of that commitment, but with a bit of a lighthearted element to it. But what they're saying is they don't want all of the guests to come in with drinks from the bar and their canapes and everything. They want to keep it very separate from the celebrations, the things that happens afterwards.
Absolutely.
But I think that's nice that they've acknowledged that food and drink can be part of the ceremony itself. I think provide some really specific examples based on couples that you've worked with, what works really well, what you might be concerned about. So if you might think that this is too loose. You might think that a couple are going to come to you and say, I want to get married in a really random place, and you wouldn't know how to deal with that and how to assess whether it was a dignified location or whether a safe location or whatever. So you really think about what would it be like if I was working currently under this framework and how would it work for couples, and answer with those specific examples.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. Thank you. And Russell, if people aren't perhaps confident using, legal language or terminology that you might hear in a government document normally, does that matter? Are we meant to just be using our own voice? Is that something that, celebrants should be, they might be worried about that, thinking I want to make sure I come across as, very professional, very dignified in my answers. So, how can we work on that, I guess?
I think the more authentic, the better.
Yes.
I think authenticity is key, but relevance is key. I think those are the 2 points, really. So I think as long as you're responding to the actual questions and your response meets what the question is asking, then it doesn't matter how it's written.
Yes, great.
And indeed, it's better to be authentic than to put on legalese, because that's not what they're looking for here. As Sophie's pointed out, they're looking for what would be the practical implications if we do these things.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the thing to bear in mind here.
Yes.
And we really don't want template responses either. I think, we have already had a few people say, have you got any responses you would recommend? Absolutely. We can guide people if they want to give us a call or send us an email and ask some questions about, what does this mean and how could I respond to it? That's fine. We're happy to guide people, but the government do not want template responses.
Yes.
They want specific examples based on our own personal experience. They want to see how this is going to work in practice.
Absolutely, definitely. And what about our couples and other suppliers, venues, photographers? Should we be encouraging them to take part too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Volume
absolutely.
matters. Volume matters.
Absolutely.
So, as much as, we don't want those sort of responses, nevertheless, there will be an analysis of responses done in pure statistical terms.
Yes, of course.
So, if people don't want to fill in the actual words boxes, just going through it and ticking is helpful.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
know, and I think it's worth remembering, of course, there's going to be a lot of other interested parties in this consultation who will be doing similar things.
100%.
So that's why it's important to really gather as many people around this as possible.
So I think, most celebrants will tell you that they've worked with so many suppliers, wedding suppliers, like photographers, for example, who say to us, your ceremonies are the best, you make it so personal, so meaningful. We want that kind of evidence submitted from them. So anybody in the wedding industry who has an opinion about this, we would really encourage them to complete the consultation.
100%.
Obviously, couples, I mean, if you've had a wedding with a celebrant or otherwise, if you're engaged and you're planning to get married, or if you're just, thinking you'll get married at some point in the future and then this would matter to you and you'd want a celebrant wedding, it's really important that everyone who's got any interest in this responds.
Absolutely.
It's open to everybody.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, I've been at a wedding today and that exact same thing happened, Sophie. I had the videographer talking about the ceremony and the photographer. And in this example, my couple, it's a 2-night minimum hire at their venue. So they had the legal part last night. And when I got there, the venue coordinator said, oh, they've just done their legal bit. They were in there for 11 minutes because they didn't want to make a big deal of that. Today was their wedding day and today was their big day with all their family and friends. And today was the meaningful day for them. Yesterday, they just kind of wanted to actually get the legal part done, and it worked well for them doing it the night before. But I think for me, I know there's been a huge, emphasis on all the places it will open up and all these fantastic opportunities, which I think is wonderful. And I know there's been a lot of talk about the boat. I know the boat's been the star of the show for
And
this.
the pub.
Yes, exactly. And I think
Couple always went with the pub.
absolutely, the pub's always a winner. And I think all that is wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I think that's fantastic, and all these opportunities for couples that maybe wouldn't have had a wedding or are putting off a wedding. But I think for me personally and my couples, just to make that process more simple for them. I've had so many couples that have had so many hoops to jump through and hurdles they've had to overcome in terms of, availability of legal registrations or going to the registry office or getting the registrars out to them. It's been quite a lot of headache for quite a long time. And I think for me, what I'm looking forward to is it being a more simple process for our couples and actually being able to combine the two, having the meaningful ceremony that they want, but doing their legal paperwork at the same time. Is just going to alleviate a lot of stress at a time that's, very emotional for them anyway. It's a very highly charged time for them in their lives. So I think that's something I'm really looking forward to. I know all these fantastic venues it's going to open up is also wonderful, but I think just simplifying the process and lowering stress levels for everyone, I think is going to be really, really useful. When you mentioned, Russell, obviously there are going to be some other interested parties. Let's just talk a little bit about maybe some of the concerns that might have come through. So what concerns might have been raised by registrars, for example, after the consultation has come out?
We how people are going to respond to this consultation. What we do know is how people responded to the Law Commission's consultation.
Yeah.
We do know that there was quite a concerted response which sort of saw this as sort of heathen and saw this as undermining the role of religion and opening up the door to sort of, commercial celebrants. And we've seen bishops in the House of Lords using that language. And what's fantastic is that this paper firmly slaps that down. But of course, whilst we're seeing that as slapping it down, others will see it very much as provoking the bear. And so it's likely there will be quite a lot of responses. And I think I'm right in saying that numerically, the Law Commission's last paper, or consultation, which fed into the last paper, there were more negatives than positives. So that's something to bear in mind. In terms of registrars, I mean, on the surface, a lot of what they do is going to be left untouched by this. In fact, they're going to have slightly more business to do at the start of the process.
Yes.
So I don't know the extent to which they're going to feel as if sort of they're losing out in terms of business, to put it that way. One of the things which I really like, I think, I've got to think it through properly, but one of the things I quite like about this document is it does still keep quite a lot of distinctions between registrars and independent celebrants.
Yes, absolutely.
With the Law Commission's last paper was that it sort of decided to throw independent celebrants in with civil registrars. And although this document does at times, it doesn't at any point where it's meaningful.
Yes.
It's quite weird in that it sort of creates this distinction, says there's belief and then there's civil officiants, and then does nothing with it. Because that's not the meaningful distinction at any point. And one of the key differences, or one of the key ways in which they develop, is talking about the use of religion or belief in ceremonies conducted by registrars,
yes,
and ceremonies conducted by independent celebrants. And they now make a distinction between those two there. And basically, in relation to independent celebrants, they say you can use, and this is the language they use in the consultation paper, you can use bits of a recipe from a religious service.
Oh, nice.
Thing.
Yeah.
Whereas registrars can't themselves do that, but other people could do it as part of the ceremony. So I think that's a really nuanced and appropriate way of dealing with that, and is the real strength. So, yeah, to go back to the question, it remains to be seen how people will respond to this.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's quite easy to respond to the way in which it's presented in the media, to go, why should people get married in the pub? Whereas actually it's much more nuanced, but still remarkably accessible.
Yes, absolutely.
Whoever's drafted this deserves an award, because this is complicated stuff expressed incredibly clearly and very, very convincingly, in my view.
Yes, absolutely. And Sophie, anything you'd like to add about, addressing maybe some of the concerns, like what we can do as celebrants in our responses to address some of those concerns, maybe?
So I think there are some things that are still a little bit vague. The first one is the dignity framework, which, although there's a lot of detail and a lot of examples that the government give about what would be dignified and what wouldn't, it's impossible to kind of have an exhaustive list of what's dignified and what's not. So I suppose in that sense, it has to be vague. If we really put ourselves in that situation of, what if a couple asked me for this location or this bit of content in their ceremony, then how would I know whether that's dignified or not? Does the consultation proposals, do they go into enough detail for me to be able to make a valid judgment about whether that's acceptable? And the other thing is the religion. It's really interesting because they seem to be being a bit more strict than the Law Commission were proposing in terms of registrars being allowed to include religion or belief in ceremonies. It seemed like registrars and civil and independent officiants were kind of being lumped together in that sense, and that they could include religion and belief as long as it was still clearly a civil ceremony with elements of religion and belief rather than being a religious ceremony. Whereas now what they've said is that if they were to allow registrars to actually lead sort of acts of worship or lead that expression of religion or belief, it could be seen as the state endorsing a certain religion or belief, which
that makes sense.
They're very careful that they don't want to be doing that. They say that registrars would be able to allow participants, so the couple or the guests, to come up and do a Bible reading, for example.
Yeah, lovely.
So it's not completely ruled out like it is at the moment, because at the moment most registrars are very...
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's things like that which are still perhaps a little bit vague. How much religion could I include in my ceremony? Especially if you're a celebrant, an independent celebrant who has a religion or a belief yourself. if you're quite a spiritual person and you think, well, actually, I could lead a fully religious or a fully spiritual ceremony because I hold that belief. Where's the distinction there between, are you posing as a religious minister
Yes.
or are you still an independent celebrant doing a civil ceremony with elements of belief?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think maybe that's where examples will come in handy, and for them
Definitely.
to be able to, the government to be able to think about how this will work in practice.
Yeah, definitely. There's one I always go back to, and I think I've probably told both of you before, but it was a same-sex couple that I had who were very religious themselves. They went to church every weekend. They belonged to the Church of England, but they weren't able to legally get married at the church. So they wanted to combine a ceremony with myself and a registrar where they could do the legal bit at the start, then hand over to myself. And they wanted to have one of the brides, her brother, wanted to come forward and do a blessing for them. He was a lay minister as part of the church. So in the end, we managed to give them something that was perfect for them. And we were able to include nods to their religion, but it took a lot of work to get there, to be able to do the legal part. The registrars had to leave. They had to be off the site before I could take over, and then her brother could come up. So there was a lot of moving parts to that. So I think finding this solution which allows couples to still be able to do it their way and honour their religion and their faith and their culture is so important. And yeah, it's like you say, it's just all very welcome, the points that they've made and the way that they've looked at it all. I think it's fantastic. So, Russell, I'm going to come to you before we wrap up. Just a couple more questions for both of you. But, Russell, if a celebrant only remembers one thing from this episode, what do you think is one of the most important things for them to remember?
Well, respond relevantly.
Yes.
And respond authentically.
Yes. Absolutely. That's fantastic. And, Sophie, if every celebrant that's listening to this right now, if they all completed the consultation, what kind of difference could that make?
It would make a massive difference, because I don't have the figures, but there are many, many independent celebrants out there who are out there all the time conducting really personal, meaningful, beautiful, dignified ceremonies. I really hope every independent celebrant will respond to this consultation, because then surely they'll get thousands of responses with really concrete examples of why this is a good idea and why it would work in practice. And if every celebrant was to ask the couples that they're working with to respond as well and talk about their experiences, some of the hurdles that they're having to jump over at the moment, and why they chose a celebrant, what it means to them, that's another few thousand we can add on to that. So
Absolutely.
I think just respond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make sure you respond.
I think especially at the moment in wedding season, I'm not going to lie, when the consultation came out in peak wedding season, I was thinking, how am I going to juggle all my weddings and think about this as well? But I think when it is this time of year, celebrants can feel like there's a lot to be thinking about and a lot to be making sure that they're invested in spending their time. But also sometimes for our couples, we can sometimes feel like we don't want to be bombarding them after the wedding and asking for reviews and all these kind of things. But this is so important. So if we were to ask our couples to perhaps answer one or two of the questions, which are the most important ones that we want to be asking them to answer?
I believe it's 27. Let me double check.
I think I've heard that number a lot recently. That's the number we're all loving. It's the new magic number.
It's the new magic number, yes. So let me just find it. Question 27. Do you agree with allowing independent officiants to conduct legally binding weddings?
Yes.
Please explain your reasoning in the text box.
Number 27. Remember that, everyone, then. If you're going to ask your couples for one thing, instead of the Google review for now, come back to that in 6 months. For now, get them to answer the consultation and question number 27. And then finally, Russell, tell people exactly what they should be doing once they finish listening to this episode. So what are the kind of steps they need to go through?
Well, download the PDF document from the website, from the government website. It's the one that's about 100 pages long. The questions are part of that. Have a read through it, have a read through the rest of the literature, which referred to earlier, if that's helpful. But I think to a certain extent, this document does stand on its own, and there's no need for additional homework. Download it, have a read through it, and then download or access the question document if that's the way in which you want to respond, or send them an email, or post them a letter, send them a carrier pigeon, whatever else is
Anything, whatever we need.
That.
It does look like a technical document.
Yes.
Does plunge in straight away to questions which a lot of people listening to this will probably not be particularly bothered by, to be blunt, but are later questions which will matter. So there's nothing wrong with skimming through the bits of the consultation, and indeed skimming through the questions which you don't care about.
Absolutely. Yeah. To get to the ones you do. Yeah, 100%.
I think it's just important to say as well that you don't necessarily have to download anything if you want to do it all online. So when you're on the government website, there's a left-hand menu where you can click through the different chapters and read it on the screen if you don't want to have to download anything. And then on that main government page, there's also a link right at the bottom that says respond online. And that takes you to the Ministry of Justice website.
Right.
You then click another button, and then you can actually answer the questions online and submit it online.
Fantastic.
That way, that's easier.
And the only bit you need to fill in is the about you bit.
Yes.
You do need to fill that in for it to be fed in. So once you've filled in that first page, then when you actually get to the questions,
you can choose any. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And how long should people be allowing? Like if someone's listening to this and thinking, right, I've got a wedding on Monday, I've got a funeral on Wednesday, and I'm doing my admin day on Thursday, how long should they be allowing in their diary to sit down and go through all this?
It depends how many questions you want to answer and whether you want to read the whole document. I recommend you set aside a couple of hours.
Yes, nice.
You maybe put it in your diary so you've set aside a decent chunk of time to read through the whole document and answer as many questions as you can, and also to have the headspace to give it a bit of thought, come up with some examples, because if you're sort of trying to do it here and there while you're juggling other stuff, your answers are not likely to be as strong.
Yeah, sit down, think of it like script writing, guys. Just think, look, we set the time aside for that, let's set the time aside for this. It's the most important thing you're ever going to write.
And you can come back if you're responding online. You can save your progress. So you could answer a few questions and then come back another day.
Brilliant.
As long as you've submitted it by the 24th of September.
Great. Get it in your diary, guys. 24th of September. Final question. Russell, I'll come to you for this one. I've had an email today from one of my couples, so I'm sure all the other celebrants have as well. When do we think, once the consultation's finished, how long do we think before we might see a difference, before this might come into effect?
A lot of that will depend on what the consultation response is.
Yeah.
And that's why what I said earlier about it not being lukewarm is important, because it'll need to be seen as something which is a priority for the Ministry of Justice and then a priority for the government. David Lammy, when he was still in charge of this for a couple of days after the consultation, was talking about it being possible to get a legislation through in this parliament or in this government. That surely should be the aim, but that does require this to be seen as a priority and does require it to be met with something more than a lukewarm response, because it's not just about it being seen as something that's important in its own right, but being seen as more important than other things.
Absolutely.
Now, what's worth just being aware of is that there was a consultation published a few weeks before this by the Ministry of Justice, which is on reforming the law on relationship breakdown.
Okay.
Reforming the law on financial provision on divorce, bringing in rights for people who are cohabiting, which in changing both in terms of relationship breakdown, but also in terms of death as well. Jury consultation. It's worth noting that some of that is probably more contentious than this consultation in some eyes, but it's also worth noting there's a paragraph in this consultation which talks about the two being hand in hand effectively.
Great.
And so what I can foresee happening is if, and hopefully it's a when rather than if, but when and if this comes to legislation, those two things could very well come together in the same bill, for instance.
Yeah.
And so that could help rocket this along, and this could help rocket that along at the same time. But no, I mean, obviously, if couples are listening to this, this is not going to affect weddings in the short term.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
consultation does not change the law. This is just the first step. And we obviously don't know when other steps will be made. But if you want this to go ahead, what you can do to help this move along is to respond with enthusiasm.
Absolutely, yeah.
To respond with in a full-bodied way.
Absolutely. That's actually what I replied to my couple with. So I said to them, I've been kind of advising 2027 couples to just carry on business as usual. However, the consultation is out now, and the more people they hear from, the more exciting it is. So actually, I said to this couple, look, consultation's here, click on it, let them know. You never know, maybe it would happen by the time it's their wedding next year. But yeah, I think that's the thing. We know these things take time, and the famous words that are drilled into my brain are when parliamentary time allows. So we've got to make them know that this is so important.
What I love, though, is that David Lammy went on camera saying, I think that there's a realistic chance of this going through by the next election.
Yeah.
So although he's not in charge anymore, he's there saying that. So that's a very good kind of thing that we can use to say, come on, get on with it.
Come on, we've got it on video. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today. It's just so exciting, and for all of your hard work towards the campaign. Obviously, I know, Russell, you've been really spreading the word, and you're a fantastic champion of Celebrants, both humanist and independent Celebrants. And Sophie, obviously everything that the Give Couples Choice movement has done is just fantastic. So thank you to both of you for everything so far. And yeah, it's been a fantastic episode. And basically, everyone, don't be scared of the consultation. Just get it in your diary, sit down, get some time to fill it in, and go for it and share that passion with everyone. And yeah, fantastic. And fingers crossed we get some good results. Thank you so much for joining me, both of you. And of course, everyone who's been listening to this are thinking, right, I want to go and I'm raring to go. I want to go and fill in the consultation. We will make sure that the links are all included in the show notes. And Russell, if people want to find out more about you and obviously everything that you've worked on so far, where can people find you, Russell?
On various different social media platforms as Sandberg Law. And I have a book on religion and marriage law. The Need for Reform was a couple of years old now, but nevertheless gives the background and gives the story to this.
It's fantastic. Okay, so if people want to find you, Sophie, and the Give Couples Choice movement, if people want to find out more about that, where can they go?
So they can just head to the Give Couples Choice movement website, which is gccmovement.org.
Thank you so much. And everyone go and check out that link, and we'll look forward to hearing what the next steps are going to be. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining.